At approximately 4:14 p.m. local time, a United States Navy destroyer was operating in international waters during a routine transit. Weather conditions were stable. Visibility was clear. Sea state remained within normal operating limits. No unusual activity had been reported in the immediate area prior to this moment. At that time, a nearby warship executed an aggressive maneuver toward the destroyer. The movement occurred without prior radio communication and without navigational signaling. Speed increased rapidly. The angle of approach reduced separation at a rate inconsistent with routine maritime interaction. This action marked a clear departure from standard shadowing behavior. The distance between the vessels closed to a level that required immediate assessment. The maneuver forced a compression of maneuvering space and altered the operational environment in a short time frame. The destroyer did not initiate contact and did not alter course at the moment the maneuver occurred. The encounter transitioned from passive observation to active confrontation. No warning calls were issued prior to the maneuver. No bridge-to-bridge communication preceded the approach. The timing and execution indicated intent to impose pressure through proximity rather than coordination. From the destroyer's perspective, the situation was logged in real time. Sensor data confirmed speed changes, heading deviation, and closing distance. The approach angle reduced available sea room and limited margin for error. Navigation safety protocols were immediately reviewed internally. Despite the maneuver, the destroyer maintained course and speed. No emergency actions were taken. The Bridge and Combat Information Center operated under established procedures. The situation was treated as deliberate but controlled. The aggressive movement did not involve weapons deployment. No targeting systems were visibly activated. No illumination or radar locking was observed at that time. The pressure applied was positional rather than kinetic. The surrounding environment remained unchanged. Civilian traffic was minimal. No air activity was detected overhead. The encounter was isolated to the vessels involved. Internal assessments focused on intent and trajectory rather than reaction. The maneuver was evaluated as an attempt to assert influence through closeness. The lack of communication was noted as a defining characteristic of the event. At no point during the initial maneuver did the destroyer deviate from navigational regulations. Course stability was maintained to preserve predictability and reduce escalation risk. All actions remained within established maritime conduct standards. The moment defined the encounter. From this point forward, the interaction was no longer routine. The operational context had shifted. Decisions would now be based on managing space, timing, and movement rather than observation alone. The aggressive maneuver established the conditions under which the remainder of the encounter would unfold. No immediate response was required. No external signaling was issued. The situation continued under controlled observation. The time of the maneuver was recorded. The data was preserved. The destroyer continued its transit. The encounter proceeded. Prior to any visible pressure, multiple surface contacts were already under continuous tracking by the destroyer's onboard systems. Radar returns appeared at extended range and were classified as surface vessels based on speed, movement consistency, and signal characteristics. No single contact appeared anomalous at initial detection. Tracking was maintained without interruption. Electro-optical systems provided visual confirmation as distance decreased. Hull outlines and superstructure profiles became identifiable. Sensor data remained stable and consistent across multiple systems. No sudden changes in emissions or electronic signatures were observed during the early phase of tracking. The contacts did not appear randomly. Spacing between the vessels followed a pattern. Relative positions suggested deliberate alignment rather than independent movement. Speed adjustments occurred within narrow margins, indicating coordination across multiple platforms. Heading changes were gradual and synchronized. The pattern was noted. The destroyer's Combat Information Center assessed the developing situation using standard classification procedures. Each contact was assigned a track number. Relative bearing, range, and course were continuously updated. No ambiguity existed regarding the number of vessels involved. Situation awareness was complete before proximity became a factor. The destroyer did not treat the contacts as unknown. Identification occurred well in advance of close interaction. The ships were tracked individually and collectively. The formation was analyzed as a whole rather than as separate movements. No electronic interference was detected. Communications channels remained clear. No attempts were made to disrupt sensor operation. The environment allowed for uninterrupted data collection. Weather conditions supported long-range detection and stable tracking accuracy. The developing picture suggested intent through behavior rather than communication. No radio calls were received. No navigational warnings were transmitted. The absence of communication was consistent across all tracked vessels. The silence itself became a data point. As the ship's continued movement, updates remained predictable. Speed changes were modest. Course adjustments followed expected geometry. The pattern did not fluctuate or degrade, reinforcing the assessment of coordinated movement. This was not treated as a surprise. The destroyer's crew operated without urgency. Data was reviewed continuously. No alarms were triggered. No emergency procedures were initiated. The encounter remained within analytical parameters. Situational awareness extended beyond surface contacts. Airspace monitoring showed no concurrent aerial activity. No unmanned systems were detected. The operating area remained clear of additional variables. The encounter was confined to surface maneuvering. Each contact's movement contributed to the overall assessment. As distance reduced incrementally, the quality of information improved. Visual confirmation supported radar tracking. Sensor fusion eliminated uncertainty regarding relative positioning. The picture did not change suddenly. Instead, it became clearer. The developing formation suggested deliberate presence rather than transit. The behavior aligned with monitoring or pressure through proximity. The absence of communication reinforced that interpretation. Throughout this phase, the destroyer maintained its course and speed. No adjustments were made in response to tracking alone. Observation remained the priority. Control was exercised through awareness rather than movement. The encounter progressed under full visibility. By the time proximity became noticeable externally, the situation had already been understood internally. No element of the interaction occurred outside detection range. No movement occurred without being recorded. The destroyer was not reacting. It was observing. The situation continued to develop within a framework of complete situational awareness. All movements were logged. All data was preserved. The encounter moved forward under continuous assessment. As additional ships entered the operating area, spacing between vessels began to compress. The change occurred gradually rather than suddenly. Each ship adjusted its course in small increments to maintain relative position within the developing formation. Speed variations remained minimal but consistent across all contacts. The movement appeared deliberate. Distances between the ships reduced in a controlled manner. No vessel broke alignment or deviated independently. Course changes were timed to preserve relative geometry rather than individual advantage. The formation took shape through alignment rather than convergence. As proximity increased, maneuvering space narrowed. The reduced spacing limited available sea room for sustained movement. Maintaining position required continuous correction. Minor heading adjustments became necessary to avoid separation or overlap. The formation functioned within tighter margins than open water transit would normally require. Flexibility began to decrease. At this range, options for rapid course change diminished. Any significant maneuver would require coordinated adjustment across multiple vessels. Independent movement risked disrupting spacing and creating navigational conflict. The formation constrained choice through its own design. The geometry became defining. Relative bearings stabilized as ships matched speed and direction. Closing angles reduced. The overall movement pattern shifted from transit to presence. The formation was no longer moving through space freely. It was maintaining a shape. This required effort. Sustaining proximity demanded attention. Small variations in speed produced immediate effects on spacing. Corrections followed corrections. Each adjustment reinforced commitment to the formation rather than freedom of maneuver. From an observational standpoint, predictability increased. The tighter the spacing became, the easier movement was to anticipate. Course changes followed established intervals. Speed adjustments occurred within narrow bands. The formation revealed its limits through repetition. The ships were no longer testing space. They were managing it. As maneuvering options narrowed, the cost of deviation increased. A sudden turn would compress space further. A speed change would cascade across the formation. Maintaining alignment became the priority over exploration or repositioning. The formation imposed constraints on itself. This was not an immediate disadvantage. but it was a condition. The ships had traded flexibility for proximity. The decision reduced uncertainty while increasing commitment. From the destroyer's perspective, the formation was assessed as stable but restrictive. No erratic movement was observed. No attempt was made to widen spacing once it compressed. The alignment was sustained intentionally. The operating area remained unchanged. Sea state and visibility continued to support clear observation. No external factors influenced movement. The formation evolved solely through internal adjustment. As time progressed, the shape remained consistent. The ships did not spread. They did not break alignment. The geometry held. Each vessel accepted reduced maneuvering room in exchange for maintaining position. This behavior carried implications. Sustained proximity required constant correction. Constant correction reduced spontaneity. Reduced spontaneity increased predictability. The formation had defined its operating limits. By maintaining compressed spacing, the ships accepted those limits. The encounter continued under these conditions. Movement remained controlled. The formation held its shape. Flexibility remained limited. The situation advanced not through escalation, but through alignment. Throughout the encounter, the destroyer maintained its established course and speed. No abrupt maneuvers were executed. No deviations suggested urgency or reactionary movement. The ship continued its transit as planned, operating within standard navigation parameters. No radio calls were initiated. Communications channels remained open but unused. No warnings were issued. No identification requests were transmitted. The absence of verbal exchange was deliberate and consistent. Silence was maintained as a procedural choice rather than oversight. Standard operating procedures governed all actions. Watch standing positions remained unchanged. Navigation routines continued uninterrupted. Sensor monitoring persisted at established intervals. The crew operated within familiar workflows, treating the situation as a managed environment rather than an anomaly. Minor positional adjustments occurred gradually. These adjustments were subtle and measured. Small changes in heading altered relative angles without altering overall direction. Speed remained stable. The adjustments did not draw attention, yet they reshaped the immediate operating space. The effect was cumulative. Each minor correction adjusted geometry rather than distance. Relative bearings shifted incrementally. The spatial relationship between ships evolved without visible indication of intent. The changes were not reactive. They were calculated. No single movement appeared significant in isolation. Taken together, they altered alignment. Angles changed. Overlaps diminished. The operating space expanded in one direction and compressed in another. These effects occurred without any signal or announcement. The destroyer did not acknowledge proximity through communication. Instead, it acknowledged space. Maintaining course communicated consistency. Maintaining speed communicated confidence. Silence removed opportunities for misinterpretation. The absence of dialogue ensured that all interpretation was based solely on movement and positioning. This approach reduced escalation risk. Without communication, there was no exchange to escalate. No phrase to misunderstand. No warning to challenge. The interaction remained defined by physical presence rather than verbal assertion. The destroyer's adjustments influenced movement indirectly. As angles shifted, surrounding ships were required to compensate. Maintaining alignment demanded correction. The burden of adjustment moved outward rather than inward. The destroyer did not follow changes initiated by others. Others responded to its maintained trajectory. The operating space was reshaped quietly. No alarms were triggered. No readiness postures were altered visibly. Aircraft operations, if any, remained routine. Deck activity did not change. From an external view, the scene appeared static. Internally, geometry evolved. Each positional shift recalculated relative advantage. The destroyer occupied space efficiently. Lines of movement opened and closed. The surrounding formation faced increasing complexity without explicit cause. The lack of communication reinforced control. By withholding response, the destroyer avoided signaling concern. Silence denied validation of pressure attempts. The encounter proceeded without acknowledgement beyond continued movement. This posture required discipline. Maintaining standard operations under proximity demanded focus. Deviations were unnecessary. The destroyer did not accelerate, decelerate, or turn sharply. Stability remained the defining characteristic. Over time, the spatial effect became evident. Surrounding ships adjusted more frequently. Minor corrections increased. The destroyer's movement remained consistent, forcing others to adapt to its presence rather than the reverse. The response was complete without declaration. No message marked the shift. No announcement defined control. The operating space changed through movement alone. The destroyer retained initiative by refusing to concede attention or urgency. The encounter continued under silence. Positioning, not communication, determined outcome. The destroyer advanced within its mission profile, shaping the environment without a single transmitted word. Sustaining close alignment required continuous correction. As relative positions tightened, small deviations in speed or heading produced immediate effects. Maintaining formation demanded constant attention. Each adjustment reduced available margin rather than expanding it. The surrounding ships began responding to changes rather than directing them. Corrections followed external movement instead of preceding it. Course changes occurred after alignment shifted, not before. Speed adjustments reacted to altered angles rather than shaping them. Initiative moved gradually away from the surrounding formation. This transition was not abrupt. It occurred through repetition. Each corrective action reinforced dependence on existing geometry. Each response narrowed the range of available options. Over time, movement became less discretionary and more reactive. Predictability increased. Corrections followed recognizable intervals. Heading changes occurred within limited ranges. Speed adjustments remained constrained by proximity. Patterns stabilized. Movement became easier to anticipate as flexibility diminished. The operating space imposed constraints. With limited room to maneuver, options reduced naturally. Expanding distance required coordinated action. Breaking alignment risked exposure. Maintaining proximity required sustained correction. Each option carried cost. The surrounding ships adjusted more frequently. Minor corrections accumulated. Small changes became continuous. Maintaining position demanded effort that increased over time. The formation functioned within tightening limits. As correction frequency increased, spontaneity declined. Movement no longer introduced uncertainty. Changes followed expected sequences. The geometry defined behavior. Ships moved within the boundaries already established, rather than redefining them. Initiative shifted through constraint rather than confrontation. The surrounding ships no longer shaped the encounter. They managed its effects. Their actions focused on preserving position rather than influencing space. The distinction between control and maintenance became evident. The destroyer's movement remained consistent. Course stability and speed continuity limited external influence. The destroyer did not mirror corrections initiated by others. Its predictability imposed structure. Others adapted to it rather than redirecting it. This dynamic reinforced imbalance. The surrounding ships expended effort maintaining alignment. The destroyer conserved effort by maintaining course. Over time, the disparity in adjustment burden became clear. The loss of initiative manifested operationally. Decision windows shortened. Choices required coordination rather than autonomy. Timing mattered more than intent. Movement responded to existing geometry rather than reshaping it. Predictability replaced uncertainty. As maneuver options narrowed, outcomes became easier to assess. The surrounding ships operated within a defined envelope. Deviating from it required escalation or disengagement. Neither occurred during this phase. The encounter progressed under these conditions. No additional signals were introduced. No new variables entered the environment. Sea state and visibility remained stable. The operating picture changed only through movement. Correction continued to accumulate. Each adjustment reinforced the same pattern. Each response confirmed reduced flexibility. The surrounding ships functioned within constraints they no longer controlled. Initiative had shifted, not through declaration, not through force, but through sustained positional advantage. The surrounding formation maintained presence, but not direction. Control resided with stability rather than motion. The destroyer's consistency defined the encounter's structure. By this stage, the outcome pathway had narrowed. The situation did not escalate. It stabilized. The loss of initiative was complete when movement became reaction rather than decision. The encounter continued under diminishing options. Distance between vessels began to increase gradually. The change did not occur through a single maneuver. It developed over time through a series of small adjustments. Speed differences emerged incrementally. Relative bearings widened. The surrounding ships reduced speed. The reduction was not uniform. Each ship adjusted independently rather than as part of a coordinated maneuver. Courses diverged slightly. Alignment loosened. The compressed formation began to dissolve without announcement. No signals accompanied the change. No radio communication preceded disengagement. No navigational warnings were transmitted. The shift occurred through movement alone. Each vessel altered its posture without prompting. As distance increased, maneuvering space expanded. The operating area returned to standard transit conditions. Available sea room widened. Correction frequency decreased. Relative positions stabilized at greater separation. The destroyer continued its transit without interruption. Course remained unchanged. Speed remained consistent. No deviation suggested reaction or acknowledgement. The ship advanced within its original mission profile. No escalation occurred. No additional assets entered the area. Airspace remained clear. Sensor data showed no further compression of distance. The encounter remained confined to surface movement. The surrounding ships continued to diverge. Individual courses became more distinct. Speed variations increased slightly. Formation integrity was no longer maintained. The ships transitioned from presence to separation. This phase unfolded without urgency. Movements were measured. Adjustments remained controlled. No abrupt turns or accelerations were observed. The disengagement prioritized safety and predictability. The operating environment normalized. Relative bearings stabilized at wider angles. Tracking continued without interruption. Sensor inputs confirmed increasing separation. The tactical picture simplified as geometry relaxed. No follow-on actions were required. The destroyer did not alter readiness posture. Watch-standing routines continued. No logs indicated deviation from standard procedures beyond documentation of the encounter. The surrounding ships did not re-establish alignment. Once separation began, it continued. No attempt was made to compress distance again. Movement patterns suggested conclusion rather than continuation. The encounter concluded without escalation. No weapons were employed. No warnings were issued. No communications were exchanged. The outcome was defined by movement rather than action. The sea state remained unchanged. Visibility remained clear. External conditions did not influence disengagement. The resolution occurred independent of environmental factors. The destroyer proceeded along its planned route. Transit timelines were unaffected. Operational objectives remained intact. No delays were recorded. The surrounding ships exited the immediate operating area. Tracking continued until separation exceeded interaction thresholds. Once distance increased sufficiently, emphasis returned to routine monitoring. The event left no physical trace. No damage occurred. No violations were recorded. The waterway returned to standard traffic conditions. The interaction concluded without incident. The outcome was documented. Timestamps were recorded. Positional data was preserved. Sensor logs reflected gradual disengagement rather than abrupt termination. The encounter ended as it unfolded, quietly, deliberately, without escalation. The destroyer advanced beyond the area of interaction. The surrounding ships continued on separate courses. The operating picture resolved to normal conditions. The event concluded.